All right, so example 12, ripped from the headlines, if you will. You're going to have a free response question on the test, ultimately, that'll look very similar to this. Now, because this wasn't a test question, I actually asked more things on this question than I would on the actual test. We try to make it worth 9 checks, and this one I came up with 12 checks. But here's the idea. You got the flu spreading through campus. The campus has 2,200 students, so that's the carrying capacity. It's going to spread according to this, which if you weren't told that it was a logistic equation, you should be able to infer that it is just from the way it looks. You have that number in the top over 1 plus or minus some power of e. But it is logistic. You type this into Y1 using your horizontal division bar, and remember you set your window so that you can see the curve. And if you don't see the S-curve, you should not proceed to answer questions. So if you type it in, here's what it would look like. 2200 over 1 plus 99e, which is second ln to the negative 0.1x. The window I chose, I went from negative 1 to 100. You could go from 0 to something. 100 was just kind of a guess. I turned the scale off to 0 on the x scale. Y min, I went from negative 1 to, and of course 2500 is easy because you got 2200 people in the school. Just set it a little bit greater than that and turn your y scale to 0. I actually chose my x max to be about 30 at first, and that was too small, so then I extended it. So once you hit graph, you see this nice S-curve in blue. And now you can answer questions confidently. So it's all about notation now. So how many students originally were infected at the end of day 3 and at the end of day 10? So here's how I would score this. Initially is going to correspond with time 0. So you're going to have to show S of 0. And if you have it in the nice screen then, you can actually just evaluate it that way from the home screen by hitting trace 0. And that's why I always start at negative 1 on my X window, so that when I do try to evaluate it at 0, it doesn't give me like a domain error. Okay, so 0 is definitely in the graphing window. And it didn't say to round to the nearest whole person. If it doesn't say to round or to report the nearest whole person, then you have to give 3 decimal accuracy. So in this case, you get 2.2 students. So for having S of O equals 2.2, you get a check. The units all the way through are going to be worth 1 check total. If you have all the correct units on all your final answers, that's just 1 check. So that's probably all I would ask on the test. I wouldn't ask for 3 of them like I did here. But how many at the end of day 3? Well, that's S of 3. Same idea, 2.968. Or if you round, 2.969. Those would be the only 2 acceptable answers. And then, of course, you put students at the end. And at the end of day 10, 5.969 if you truncate, or 5.970 if you round. So only one of those 2 answers in the presence of S of 10. So I would ask any one of these 3 on the test, but probably not all 3. So if you have those right now, give yourself 3 checks. And if you have students on the end of all 3 of them, you are eligible still for the final check, which is units. All right, part B, after how many days have 10 students been infected? So again, you're going to have to show me the question you're solving. So S of T equals 10. That's the easiest way to do it. That's the 4th check. You could actually also write all of this stuff. You could put all of that equals 10. But that's a lot more writing, yeah? If you were to solve it algebraically, that's what you'd want to do, so that you have the expression there to work with. But in this case, that's equal to S of T. So it's just easier to use the name of the function. Then you're going to graph 10 and Y2, and then see where they intersect, second trace number 5, and you get T equals 15.176 if you truncate, or 177 if you round. That'll be the 5th check. And remember, that's 2 separate lines. S of T equals 10, and then underneath there, T equals the number. If you have days on the end of that, you're eligible for the unit check at the end. All right, part C, after how many days is the flu spreading the fastest? Remember, it's always spreading the fastest at half the carrying capacity. That's the Y value. So that's at 1100. So you're going to show me S of T equals 1100. That's going to get the check. Same idea, graph 1100 and Y2, see where they intersect, and you get T equals 69.067 or 69.068 if you round. One of those 2 answers with T equals gets the 7th check. If you put days on the end of that, you're eligible for your unit check. By the way, just a word of caution here. If you don't know what the answer is, but you know what the units are going to be, as long as you put T equals some number days, as long as your units are attached to a number, you can still be eligible for a unit check at the end. So if for some reason you trip up and you falter, don't leave a section blank. Go ahead and put a numeric answer that you make up, attach it to the right units, and then you can still get the unit check. All right, part D. According to the model, after how many days will the entire student population become infected? And notice it said according to the model. That's the equation. How can you tell? So this is where I'm looking for some type of sentence, okay, where you're explaining. So according to the model, comma, the entire student population will never become infected. So that's the 8th check for saying never, essentially. And the reason is because of the horizontal asymptote at y equals 2200, the model would indicate that only over time, the number of students infected will only approach the entire population. All right, so that's the 9th check. It'll never happen according to the model because of the horizontal asymptote. It's only going to approach that final number. So that one would be worth 2 checks. One for the answer and one for the justification, for the explanation. All right, and then part E, if the school policy is to shut down the entire school, if at least 5% of the population is infected, how many days will it take for the school to shut down? So you're going to have to figure out what 5% of the population is. So 5% of 2,200, if you just multiply 2,200 times 0.05, you get 110. So the check comes from setting S of t equal to that number, 110, just like we've been doing. Then you graph 110 and y2, see where they intersect, and write down the answer to 3 decimal places, which comes out to 39.623, and that's the only answer that I would take, because that's the same if you round or truncate. If you then answer with the sentence, so after 39.623 days, the school will shut down. It's kind of nice to answer with a sentence. But if you didn't do that, and all you did was t equals 39.623, and you put days on the end, then you can still qualify for both the answer check and the unit check. It's just nice to kind of then at the very end, after you collect your numerical data, to actually answer the question in a small sentence. So then if you have the correct units on every single answer, whether it was days or students, you get the 12th check. If you leave a section blank, you're not going to get the unit check. So as I mentioned, if you like hit a wall or something on the test and you don't know how to do it, make up a number and attach it to the right units, and you can still get the unit check. All right, so this one would have been worth 12 checks. So you can kind of assess yourself and see if the test were today, how would you do on the free response? And I hope you would do really, really well. So anyway, that takes care then finally of section 4.2.